In this video, we're going to take a look at a green ink by Pilot in their Mixable series, Green. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also, down in the description is a link to the green ink playlist, so if you wanted to see more greens, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading for the stub. We get minor spots of shade like that. They're very dark in the medium, and it shows itself much better in the extra fine. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub, and the medium's darker than the extra fine, but nowhere near as dark as the stub. Extra fine took 17 seconds to dry, while the medium took 22. Scrubby for both are showing a little color variation. I think it shows better in the writing. In the smear test, I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pilot Metropolitan with a 1.0 stub was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, but we get a lot of ghosting. It's a very thin paper. No feather, no spread, no shading in the stub, no shading in the extra fine, no shading in the medium, but we have tone variation. The extra fine's the lightest on the page. Medium's a little darker than that, and stub's a lot darker than the medium. The extra fine took 21 seconds to dry, while the medium took 31. The scrubby for both give no color variation because there was none in the writing, and the smear test you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what it really looks like to me is that it's very watered down at the bottom, which you would expect more, and as it gathers towards the top, it's very, very dark. What I really believe is we have one dye that just gives a lot of tone variation depending on how diluted it is. Now the one on the right is allowed to dry for 10 minutes before it's put into water, and it looks exactly the same, meaning we expect no resistance from this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting, we have no feather, no spread. We do get spots of shading in the stub, which is quite dark. The extra fine, that's a lot lighter than the stub, also brings quite a few spots of shading within it, where you get very dark areas and much lighter areas. The medium, that's the same tone as the stub, also shows off some shading in that while most of it is very dark, you see a lot of lighter areas come out during the writing. The extra fine took 14 seconds to dry, and the medium took 17. The scrubby of the extra fine, because I forgot to do the medium, shows no color variation, but we are getting some there, and the smear test says you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, I am impressed with how well this ink did. It really held together when I expected it to be completely blown out and gone. I would feel safe using this in a note-taking situation if I had to go back and highlight. Now it's very surprising, not just from that chromatography, but look at water. Water is completely reactivating it and lifting it entirely off the paper. Now it only took water to get it out of my pen. The pen flush does everything that water does, but you're not going to need that. And speaking of not needing things, 1/3 bleach solution, that completely destroys it. The next writing sample is done on Franklin-Christoph paper. Now generally this is a very good paper, and I do like using it when this happens because I do a lot of different writing samples and I'm always picking and choosing which ones to show. When Franklin-Christoph has ink go this deep into it, even though it's a more absorbent paper, I like to point it out because it's important if you spend that kind of money on that notebook that you know what inks to avoid. I don't think you could use the back of the page, though none of this touches the page underneath, so that's good. We get feathering in the stub, all over the place in the stub. We get feathering in the medium, but not in the extra fine. The medium and stub are the same tone, while the extra fine's quite a bit lighter than the both of them. None of them have any kind of shading. The extra fine took 5 seconds to dry, the medium took 7. The scrubby for both show no color variation, we're not getting it in the writing, and the smear test you probably could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Pilot's Mixable Green has a viscosity of 1.24, making this a very wet ink. The next writing sample is done on life paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading in the stub, minor shading in the extra fine. We get a few darker spots that are occurring, really minor shading in the medium, but it is there. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub, while the stub's the same tone as the medium. Extra fine took 15 seconds to dry and the medium took 21. Scrubby for both are showing no color variation, though we do get a peppering of darker spots that occurs throughout the extra fine. And the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Pilot's Mixable Green has an average dry time of 20 seconds, so it's on the high side of normal, but still normal. The last writing sample is done on Levenger paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading in the stub, no shading in the medium, light shading that does occur in the extra fine. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub, which is the same tone as the medium. The extra fine took 5 seconds to dry and the medium took 8. Scrubby for both give no color variation. We're not getting it so much in the writing other than that light peppering that occurs in the extra fine. And the smear test, you probably could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like Pilot's Mixable Green, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a purple ink by Robert Oster, Viola. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Pilot's Mixable Green? This is a very basic green that performs perfectly fine. I can see it being used as just a green for writing, not just for mixing. Solid ink. So what nib and pen will give the best writing experience with this ink? To not have that super dark green, because that's just not what I'm caring for. I would go with a medium to dry flow medium nib. It's going to lighten it up enough that you can get some shading, but especially on a drier one, it's going to bring out a lot of that shading. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Pen BBS number 235.